Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Daryan Jones, and I'm the Caregiver Education and Digital Specialist at CarePartners. Today, we have our coordinator, Karen Pettit. She's going to be doing a presentation for us and just giving you guys a chance to ask her questions and talk to her. So with all this COVID everything going on, CarePartners is still dedicated to providing all of our caregivers with support, education, and resources. So we're going to be doing a lot more of these little online hot topics. So be sure to check our website for the calendar and be sure to follow all of our social media sites to get these really great videos and resources. So I'm going to introduce Karen. She's going to talk today about Karen, do you want to tell us what you're talking about today?
Yeah, today I'm talking about how to ask our loved ones, especially those with memory loss, questions that will get them storytelling about their childhood. And in doing so, it will bring some healing and some closure to their lives and acceptance.
Awesome. So I guess without further ado, we can go ahead and get started.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Karen.
Hi, everybody. I hope that you will just join me here at home. Everyone is at home, and I have my coffee, and I hope you do too. And I hope that during this time of sharing, it's just 15 to 20 minutes. And I hope that you make comments if you are watching live. Just let me know that you're here. Say hi and where you're tuning in from. And also, as I talk about this topic, be sure to ask me questions or make comments how it relates to your life so that we can become a community here. I'm going to be doing this for about 15 or 20 minutes. And so if you want, you can grab a paper and a pen now and a cup of coffee. Have your significant other get you a cup of coffee if necessary. And we will go on. We're going to talk about conversation. And here we are. We are self-isolating during the pandemic, and I know that it can cause anxiety, and it can be wonderful. And a lot of older individuals are already used to doing something like this because once we have reached retirement, we have more time, and we have more time to look at our entire lives and look back and reflect and ask ourselves, did we live the life that we wanted to live? Do we feel that we were productive? Or do we possibly have guilt about something? Or did we not accomplish something that we set out to accomplish? And so through conversation, through this time, through spending time with your family members and your loved ones, especially those with memory loss, with dementia, different levels of dementia, but this is mostly for people with early to mid stages of dementia. I'm going to help you plan or structure some questions that you can ask to elicit some storytelling from your loved one so that you can help them achieve a level of acceptance for themselves and for their life. So when you have a loved one with memory loss, you're probably in your upper years, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And this is the time to give that loved one the gift of acceptance for their life. And so any questions? I don't see any comments so far, and I'm hoping that you will join me. I'm going to wait just a minute. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee, and I hope you will too. So welcome. Again, I'm Karen Pettit. I'm a CarePartners Coordinator and hospital chaplain. And so I carry on lots of conversations. Also, just to note, before I became a coordinator with CarePartners and a hospital chaplain, my husband and I were caregivers for my father with who had dementia. And so I had conversations with him at that time. And so I learned a lot from that and from also working with CarePartners. So let me tell you, we're going to be structuring these conversations on something referred to as structured life review. We're going to be going through, helping our loved one to go through their entire lives in a review fashion. And we're going to be using Erik Erikson's model of the 8 stages of human development that he theorized that people developed from infancy to old age in a chronological development ladder of psychological outcomes. And you probably all have heard about this. Here is his book. Let's see there. And when you took Psychology 1 in college, I'm sure that you covered this. And so you know that the stages 1 through 8 are dependent upon one another, and that an individual needs to traverse the first stage successfully in order to reach the second stage, and so on, all through the 8 stages. So we are going to be looking at the first 4 stages today, and that is infancy to age about 13. And so all of these are childhood stories that we're going to be asking our loved one to reflect on. And the premise is, in the life review process, is that it can help people later in life resolve the past and overcome any unsuccessful earlier stages. All right, so let's use this time productively. I know that it's tempting to let our loved one take long naps during this time or sit in front of the TV. Let's get whoever is self-isolating with you together to listen, to be listeners. And we're going to help, as listeners, our loved ones reframe and reconcile their memories. So the final stage, according to Erik Erikson, is integrity versus despair. And in integrity, we have integrity if we're able to view our entire life, look at our memories, our feelings associated with those memories, and say, okay, I can accept that. That was the life that I was supposed to live. No, it was not perfect. I made mistakes. Maybe my parents were not perfect either, and that's okay. That's my life, and I've now gotten to this point, and I have achieved integrity, for example. So this is something that we're aiming for, and I hope to just give you some ideas to help your loved one achieve integrity too. So our loved ones who are aging, they have dementia, we want them to be able to look back on their lives with a sense of closure and completeness, and be able to accept death without fear, just to accept the time that they are in without fear and to move forward. Now, us as family members in this process, we are going to be the listeners. And this is a role that you're taking on in this conversation. And so there's certain rules for being a listener. So the rule number 1, this is not a time for writing a life history of your loved one. And let me just give you an example. We're going to be exploring feelings and not cognition. We're not specific factual memories. When my dad was living with us, I thought, I need to hear these stories so I can get these things down and know what my history is. And so I would ask him about his memories of his childhood. And at the time, I wasn't as familiar with this. And he would tell me stories that I would doubt. And I would say, Dad, are you sure that's the way it happened? Because to me, it didn't sound right. We, in this role, are going to facilitate our loved ones sharing their feelings and emotions with us and their view of what happened, and we're not going to question it. Second, this is not a time to resolve your own feelings. So when you're asking, soliciting these stories, this is not a time for you to be healing. If you cannot do this without having a lot of feelings coming up on yourself for yourself, you need to perhaps let another family member do it. And actually, those farthest removed, I guess you could say, like say grandchildren. Say if your grandchildren are sheltering in place for you, with you, or are able to come over, it would actually be better if a grandchild would take this role on, a teenager or young adult grandchild. Also, since we're dealing with loved ones with memory loss, it's very threatening if we use the phrase, do you remember? So we're not going to do that. We're not going to say, Dad, do you remember when you were 10 years old, what it was like? Just try not to use that phrase. And we're also try not to use the word but in the middle of a sentence. So if you're reframing and trying to tell Dad back what he just said, I understand, Dad, that you felt afraid, but don't you realize that your parents loved you? Then that kind of negates what he actually felt, and our loved ones may shut down. So that word but in the middle is not something we want to stay away from that. Also, if our loved ones are in need of additional props to get their senses more involved in the questioning, you may want to use to evoke the five senses and to use that as a springboard for talking about childhood. Bake bread, bake cookies, have them smell cinnamon, for example, have them touch something soft or a taste. And in doing that, you can get them to evoke these memories. All right, so let's get started. We're going to take a look at stages 1 through 4, and I'm just going to give you a brief summary. And stage 1 is infant through 18 months. And during this stage, an infant is establishing, in Erickson's words, trust versus mistrust. And so when the infant's needs are met, then according to Erickson, the child will establish trust. And if they're not met, the child will establish mistrust and possibly go through their entire life with mistrust. Now, let me just say one thing. I was talking to my friend Daryan before this, and she reminded me that this is not a fail-proof menu here. I mean, as young mothers, we try our very hardest, and fathers, we try our very hardest to provide great childhoods for our children, but they are human beings just like we are. And this is not a formula that we can say, okay, if we make sure that our infant feels trust, then they're going to be confident for the rest of their lives. We are all human beings, and you know that. So I'm just kind of putting that as a disclaimer on this whole discussion. So, but getting back to our discussion, our role as the listener is to listen attentively and help our loved one to reframe their memory. And so remember that at this time of life, up to 18 months, we probably are not going to remember specific events. But what we will remember is the feelings behind them. And so if you have a loved one who has always felt insecure in different ways, then you might ask them certain questions so that they can go back and talk with you and reprocess what they experienced back then. So here are some questions that you could possibly ask. So get out your piece of paper, your pen, and here's the first one. Did you feel cared for as a child? Or what was life like for you as a child? And what were your parents like? What were their weaknesses? What were their strengths? Just those 3 questions are going to get your loved one telling stories about that time period. Okay. And so this brings us to being better listeners. So I know it might be easier for us to be in the kitchen cooking and our loved one in the living room, and us saying, passing from the kitchen to the living room, asking them about their childhood. But we're going to take on a role where we give them our full attention, sit down, look at them, make eye contact, kind of lean forward, and pay attention. Just pay attention. Ernest Hemingway said, when people talk, listen completely. Most people never listen. And so how do we listen better? And this is for all of us. And I have to laugh about this because I am the worst at interrupting people. But pay attention. Reflect back feelings. So when Dad says, tells a story about feeling insecure, you can say that. It sounds like you felt sad. It sounds like you felt lonely. It sounds like you felt hungry, thirsty, etc. Also use paraphrasing. Give them back what they have said in a shorter sentence. Summarize what they have said back to them so that they know that you are listening. The most important thing, though, is reframing. Every time they tell a story, listen, they are telling a story that they're feeling. And they form those feelings and those thoughts around that event based on what age they were at that time. So they were an infant. They were immature, and they made judgments on what was happening based on that age. And as we listen, we can help reframe and reconstruct that event for them and tell them the truth. The truth may be that their parents cared very much and loved them very much, but were unable for some reason to provide what they needed at the time. We, through the help of prayer and through our maturity and our experience, are able to reframe and help them reintegrate those experiences so that they can move past what they experienced when they were an infant. When the Bible has something to say about this, and Psalm 51 verse 6 says, "You desire truth in my inward being. Therefore, teach me wisdom in my secret heart." If you read through the entire Psalm of 51, this is David and speaking, King David, and it is all about what we're trying to do here. We desire truth in our inner heart, and sometimes we depend on loved ones to give us that truth or help us see that truth, and it brings healing. So I'm going to move on to stage 2, that is 18 months to 3 years. And during this stage, Erickson defined it as autonomy versus shame and doubt. And young children are developing by their loved ones giving them choices to make. If those choices are supported, then the child develops confidence and moves on in a healthy way. Some questions that we can ask our loved one were, Dad, were you given opportunities to make some decisions for yourself as a child? And what independent things did you do for yourself? And remember to use all your listening skills as you ask these questions. Listening, paraphrasing back, rephrasing, and summarizing and integrating the stories, and just reframing is the most important thing based on your balanced, mature view of the event and God's help. All right, so stage 3 to 5 years, initiative versus guilt. We learn to plan and to take on various tasks. For example, my granddaughter was helping me make potato salad the other day. I was able to give her a plastic knife and potato peeler. She was able to peel all of the potatoes and cut them up and put them in a bowl. She took on the task. Through this successful task taking, a child develops initiative and confidence. And so the antithesis of this is guilt. And if they're not able to take on individual tasks or they're not successful, they might assume the feeling of guilt, which they take with them throughout life. And so let's help our loved one to move past that in a healthy way. Here's some questions for that. Did you play at any adult roles or games? Were you a leader or a follower as a young child? Did you have childhood friends and playmates? We often, through our playing, learn this and learn initiative. We play and we mimic the adults around us, cooking or working in the shop, etc. And then finally, stage 4 is 5 through 13, where we learn industry, and the antithesis is inferiority. And so we develop a work ethic during this time. And it's during this time that we're attending school and doing chores and jobs and being part of productive situations. If we do poorly and then we may develop an inferiority complex. If we do well, we're going to develop industry and self-confidence. So, here's some related questions for that. Just going to grab some coffee. All right. What was life like for you as an older child? Dad, tell me about projects you started as a child. Did you feel doubt, shame, or guilt as a young person? And so, yes, this is going to get us going. Be sure to listen well. And through repeated telling of stories and our attentive listening and reframing, our loved ones may be able to successfully traverse all 8 stages and be content, have reduced depression, greater life satisfaction, and peace, most of all. In our next video, we're going to cover the next 4 stages of development, but I just give you an assignment today, and that is to begin to listen to your loved one tell their childhood stories and use these questions to get them going on that. Be a good listener. Enjoy your time together today. And join me again next Friday at 12:30 Central Time, right here.
Thanks so much, Karen. I don't know if we got any questions in the comments this time, but I have a question.
Yeah, I didn't see any.
What would you say is one of the most important things to remember, the biggest takeaway when trying to communicate with your loved one who has memory issues? Or
I would say that we need to be really introspective, really focused on what feelings we're feeling, because we are, our loved one is not behaving anymore like we remembered them. And so just to take everything with that knowledge that we're going to focus on our loved one's feelings and not on the facts. If they tell us a story and we know it's not true, it doesn't matter. Just enter into their world and enjoy the time with them, enjoy their feelings, help them to resolve any feelings that they have brought with them throughout life so that they can have a sense of peace.
That's great advice. And like Karen said, she will be back next Friday at 12:30 for some more chatting and some more just talking about caregiving and advice. And so we'd love to have you guys, and be sure to comment your questions below. Thanks again, Karen.
Well, thank you. And thank you, everyone. I know you're out there, but something is not happening where I'm not seeing your comments. So thank you for joining me. And I really look forward to having you over to my house again next Friday at 12:30, and bring your coffee and your lunch wherever you are, whatever time zone you're in. And I'll see you then.
Thanks again, Karen. And just a quick little update. So CarePartners is going to be doing little live hot topic segments and activities every morning and every afternoon at least. So be sure to follow our Facebook page for those updates, and our website, www.carepartnerstexas.org, has all the latest on us, CarePartners monitoring the coronavirus, and updates on all of our programs. We're offering the teleconference Common Grounds every Tuesday and Thursday, and we're just going to be doing a lot more of live interactive activities for you guys. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you soon. Have a great rest of your day.